Hello friends, starting with concepts for the second day. Let me admit today's session is comparatively very easy as compared to yesterday's session. Even tomorrow and day after are going to be little technical, more technical. Today's session is quite simple. The topic for the day is financial statement analysis. This is the outline for today's presentation. We are going to talk about meaning of financial statements, components of financial statements, types of financial statement analysis, vertical analysis with example, horizontal analysis with example, ratio analysis in quite a lot of detail, and then miscellaneous analysis. Whatever are written in your syllabus, the topic number 2 will be completed today with the help of all this. First part, meaning of financial statements. Very simple, easy definition. Everybody knows it. Financial statements are basic and formal means through which management of enterprise makes public communication of financial information along with select quantitative details. Basically, management is responsible for preparing the financial statements. They are making communication of financial information related to the entity to the respective users. Users can be a large number of people, shareholders, debenture holders, government, research institutes. Many people are there who are interested in the financial information. Debtors are there, lenders are there, creditors are there, employees are there. Everybody will get communication through this financial statements. They are structured financial representation of three things: financial position, performance, and cash flows of the enterprise. So broadly, we are talking about first balance sheet, second P&L account, and thirdly the cash flow statement. They are the prime general purpose financial statements. So that is what we are talking about in this analysis. Components. Now broadly in Ind AS and IFRS, they have talked about 5 components. Earlier we used to have 3 or 4. One new is there, but that was already there in the balance sheets indirectly. But now with Ind AS and IFRS, these are the 5 components. Balance sheet, which is also called statement of financial position as on a date. Every day it changes. So as on a particular date, we are having a balance sheet. Income statement, statement of profit and loss for the period, for a particular quarter, for 6 months, for the year will be there. Cash flow statement again for the period. Statement of changes in equity. In short, they call it SOCIE. SOCIE. Now this is a term known in India also, but before application of IFRS or Ind AS, this was not talked through in earlier Companies Act or earlier financial statements. What does it include? It includes changes in shareholders' equity, net profit or loss for the year taken to balance sheet, dividends paid out of that, any utilization of those reserves, that is all included in this statement. It is telling me how the shareholder equity at the beginning and at the end are different. What are the reasons for its change? They are being quantified in this separate statement, statement of changes in equity. And lastly, this was there earlier also under old AS1 also it was there. Notes and schedules forming part of financial statements, which includes accounting policies, assumptions, explanations, whatever details are there for making the financial statements, including the cash flow statement. So they are the 5 components of financial statements. Now we are elaborating what is an asset. Asset, liability, revenue, expenses, income, cash flow. We are trying to understand these basic terms as required by your syllabus. What are assets? Asset is a resource owned by business with the purpose of using it for generating future profits. Any resource which has capacity of generating future cash flows for the entity, that will be called asset. If you can recall old Companies Act, there used to be Schedule 6 in Companies Act 1956. The young generation may not be knowing it. The old generation can recall it. On asset side, we used to have an item miscellaneous expenditure to the extent not written off or adjusted. P&L debit. It was on the asset side of the balance sheet. But technically, as per the definition, it was not an asset. Because they did not have any capacity to generate future cash inflows. They were technically, P&L debit is technically a loss. Miscellaneous expenditure was technically a loss. Not written off in the P&L in the earlier years, will be written off in the future years. But now in the new Companies Act, Schedule 3, they are all omitted. They are into the P&L deduction from P&L credit balances. They are taken to the reserve surplus. They are no more assets. Rightly so. As per definition, they were not an asset at all. Students used to get confused between intangible asset and fictitious assets. This miscellaneous expenditure or P&L was known as fictitious asset. But now it is not there in the balance sheet. So we don't have that confusion at all. The classifications we can talk quickly, little bit. Tangible assets and intangible assets. Current assets and non-current assets. So I'm looking at tangible versus intangible. Tangible assets versus intangible assets. Now very simple definitions are there. Can be seen, touched, can only be felt. You know the examples main PPP. Property, plant and equipments. They are all tangible assets that we are talking about. Intangible includes many items like goodwill, patent, trademark, copyright, know-how, and similar so many items. Now what has been felt in traditional times, majority of the entity assets were tangible. Nowadays 80-90% of the asset side of few companies comprise intangible assets. So importance of intangible assets is growing day by day. In IT companies and all, you will find major part is into the intangibles. So you need to have classification clearly, tangible versus intangible. Another classification which is talked by the standard also, that is current versus non-current. Current versus non-current. Although Schedule 3 gives many conditions, 4 conditions for current asset and 4 for current liabilities also. But here we are analysts, we should understand the broad thing. Any asset which is convertible into cash within a span not exceeding 12 months. Although in Schedule 3, 12 months is not the only condition. They are talking about operating cycle also. If the operating cycle is for more than 12 months, it may be into even 14 months conversion can lead it to current asset. In one operating cycle, if you are able to convert into cash, it becomes current asset. So broadly, examples we talked, so many examples, cash, bank, debtors, BR, inventories, they are all considered current assets. And all long-term assets, they are non-current assets. That is a basic broad classification. Getting on to liabilities. Meaning of liability. Liability is an obligation of financial nature to be settled at a future date. You are having an obligation which is to be settled at a future date. Now it may be with interest or without interest. It may be with interest or without interest. For example, you are getting material on credit, creditors, all you sign bill for this, IOU. It becomes bills payable. You don't have to pay any interest on that if you are paying within the due date. On the other hand, you go to bank, take a loan and then repay it with interest. No bank is going to give you money without charging interest. This is another kind of liability. It represents amount of money that business owes to other parties. Secured versus unsecured. For few loans, you have to give some security, some mortgage, some pledge. It becomes secured loan. Few items are where you have not paid any, given any security. Most of the time, promoter loan, it is unsecured. So you have to classify this also. You have to show this also. In analysis, this is also relevant. Current versus non-current. It is similar to as you did in case of current assets. Schedule 3 has a different set of definition. For an analyst, when any liability is to be settled within a period of $12 months out of current assets, it is current liability. I am again saying strictly it is not 12 months. Operating cycle will also come into picture if it is longer than 12 months. Many more items written there in schedule 3. Now broadly, this is the definition, and most important is out of current assets. Let us say I am having a loan of 10 lakh to be repaid 1 lakh every year for next 10 years. So 1 lakh principal as on balance sheet date is current liability, 9 lakh is non-current, just to be paid after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Remember, if something is to be paid out of non-current assets, to be not paid out of current assets, it is non-current liability. Like convertible debentures, convertible after 6 months from today, in today's balance sheet, it is still non-current liability, because they are to be converted into equity share and not paid out of current assets. So when they are not to be paid out of current asset, they remain non-current liability. If they are to be paid in cash, the portion which is to be paid in cash becomes a current liability. I am talking from analyst point of view. We are analyst. So be sure what is current and what is non-current. That is the important classification we need to make. Now revenue, expenses and incomes. It is very simple. Income is equal to revenue minus expenses. From where you are getting all this? You are getting from P&L account. So expenses does not include capital expenditure. Depreciation and amortization from capital expenditure is included, but capital expenditure itself is not included, and it is all on accrual basis. This revenue and expenses, they are on accrual basis. Income will have many different meanings. Gross income, net income, EBIT, profit after tax, profit before tax, many meanings can come. Now by default, most of the times, income represents profit after tax but before any appropriation. Before any appropriation. We have concept of above the line, below the line. All appropriations come below the line. All charging of expense comes above the line. Depreciation is above the line. Amortization above the line. Dividend below the line. Interest above the line. Taxes above the line. Corporate dividend tax no longer applicable, but it was applicable earlier. Corporate dividend tax, as per guidance note of the institute, it is to be reported along with the dividend. Hence it becomes below the line. So this is important to follow. What does income means? What does revenue mean? And what does expense mean? Cash flows. Now cash flows we are reporting in cash flow statement. Under accounting standard 3, we are studying the cash flow statement in detail. Now cash flow statement looks like this. Cash flow from operating activities, cash flow from financing activities, cash flow from investing activities. If they are net inflow plus, net outflow minus, add or less, then add opening cash and cash equivalents. They are defined in cash flow statement, the cash equivalents. Once you add, what you get is closing cash and cash equivalents. Now what I am trying to say, cash flows have been classified into 3 types of activities. The business activities are 3 types: operating, financing and investing. It's very easy. Financing is all long-term items on liability side of balance sheet. Whatever changes are there. Issue of equity share, redemption of loans, repayment of preference shares, buyback of equity shares, they are all into financing activity. If you get cash, inflow. If you pay cash, outflow. Investing activity is nothing, all long-term items on asset side of the balance sheet. Purchase of property, plant, equipment, sale of any investment, building, anything, the cash which is received from there. All receipts are inflows or payments are outflows. And cash flow from operating activities, you can calculate using direct method from receipt and payment type of statement, or from P&L you can use indirect method. So once you do that, you are going to get all the 3 cash flows: operating activity, financing and investing. Add them, you get total. Add opening cash and cash equivalent, you will get the closing cash and cash equivalent. These are cash flows. Now I reach the analysis of financial statement. Financial statement I have talked enough. Now analysis, what we are going to do? We are going to do vertical analysis, horizontal analysis, ratio analysis. Most detailed is this in your syllabus. And some miscellaneous analysis, because they are mentioned in syllabus, little bit about them, 1 slide each will be doing. Vertical analysis. Now these things you do at very small classes like +2 and we forget later on. There have been questions on this in the exam. Even 1 mark matter, and it is very easy. Not difficult, very easy, interesting. With example I will be dealing. What is vertical statement, vertical analysis? I can easily give you 3 words to remember this. Vertical analysis is making of common size statements. Remember, vertical is common size statements. What it exactly is, let's read. The proportional analysis of a financial statement where each line item of financial statement is listed as a percentage of another item. In case of income statement, sale revenue is taken as a base and every expenditure and every item is computed as a percentage of that sales revenue. In balance sheet, total of the balance sheet, total asset is taken as a base and every item is computed as a percentage of that. In cash flow statement, it can be represented as a percentage of sale or maybe operating cash inflows can be the base. From there you can calculate the percentages. How it looks like? Let's see. I have some examples for you. You can see there is standard income statement given. Sale, cost of goods sold is there, gross profit. This is cost of goods sold. You get gross profit, then administration, then selling, operating profit, then it is before interest and tax, then finance cost, that is interest, profit before tax, then after tax. These are given. Now, this is common size income statement explained. I have to take this as 100. This is 100. So 1,80,000 divided by 2,80,000 into 100 is this percentage. How did I compute this? I am writing for your remembrance. 1,80,000 divided by 2,80,000. Similarly, every next figure, gross profit, 1 lakh divided by 2,80,000 into 100. So, I can compute every item like this. This is 1 lakh divided by 2,80,000. Now, every item divided by 2,80,000 into 100 is 2011 common size income statement. Similarly, 2010 corresponding year, last year income statement, it is based on every figure divided by 2,65,000 into 100 gives me this. So, comparison is possible. We are just showing percentage based on revenue for every component of income statement. Similar common size balance sheet. This is a balance sheet given without the comparative figures of last year. We pick out the total assets, which is equal to total liabilities and equity. How did I get 1 lakh 1.77%? This I computed 1,50,000 divided by 8467138 into 100. Every figure divide by 84,67,138 multiplied by 100 makes this comparative common size statement basically. It is common size balance sheet. Earlier was common size income statement. I hope this is clear. This is vertical analysis. Vertical goes like this. Next is horizontal analysis. It goes like this. Compute percentages on horizontal basis. That is the next one. The comparison of financial information over a series of reporting periods. Always there are 2 years, current year, previous year. They may be reporting of 4 years, 5 years. There you can make more of what we call trend analysis. Instead of comparative, it becomes trend analysis. It includes comparative analysis and trend analysis. It is technique of studying operational results and financial position for a series of years. Using previous year data of business enterprise, trend analysis can be done to observe percentage changes in the selected data. Remember, horizontal analysis deals with trend analysis. HT. Vertical was common size statement. VCHT. Never get confused, because in a objective type question, it is a matter of 1.25 marks. Must remember this concept. Examples given there. You can see income statement given. Now what we do, we first calculate absolute increase or decrease. If it is decrease, shown by bracket, increase shown simply. From 12 lakh included to 14, increase to 14 lakh 98,000. So increase is 2 lakh 98,000. In percentage terms, 2 lakh 98,000 divided by original 12 lakh into 100. 2 lakh 98,000 increase on 12 lakh into 100. Same way computed for all the figures there. This is in income statement. Horizontal analysis for an income statement. Similarly, in a balance sheet, horizontal analysis has been explained. Same way. Pick out the absolute increase. This is increase or decrease. This is absolute. This is relative. In percentage terms. So we are computing increase or decrease, then increase decrease divide by previous year figure, original, into 100. Percentage increase is always absolute increase divided by original into 100. Somebody was earning salary of 3 lakh. Next year increased to 4 lakh 50,000. We say 50% increase. How did we compute? Increase 1 lakh 50,000 on original 3 lakh into 100. So that is what we are doing here also. In all the figures, we are computing same thing. Something which remains same, 0 relative, 0 absolute increase. That is shown here. It is 0, for example. So this is example of horizontal analysis. Now comes detailed analysis of ratio analysis. It's a huge topic. I'll have to go through most of the ratios. Now what I am writing on this slide, you will get this presentation with everything written on it. So you can focus more on learning or understanding. You get it from me, you can always refer back to this. One disclaimer before I start it. Ratio analysis involves computation of ratios which are not defined by any law. So one ratio may be interpreted differently by different author. I'll reach a ratio, debt equity ratio. Lots of variants there. Many people are having different understanding. Some bank, some regulations might say different formula to compute the same. I'm talking from general analyst point of view. There can be different view taken by anybody. So in objective type questions also, sometimes you calculate the ratio, none of the 4 answers are there. You have to be little flexible in your mind to apply the alternative formula to reach the answer. So that may so happen because there is no strict legal definition of every ratio. So little bit differences here and there can work out. What is a ratio? A ratio is defined as meaningful relationship between two variables. When such a relationship is created amongst the variables related to financial statements, we term it financial ratio. Such variables can be monetary or quantitative in nature. More or less monetary, but some odd ratio, they can be quantitative. For example, EPS, earnings per share, number of shares is the denominator. So that is quantitative, that is not monetary. Majority ratios, they are having the monetary. Ratio may be expressed in percentage, like GP ratio, NP ratio, ROI. They are in percentage. Maybe in number of times. You will find some turnover ratios in times. Debt to turnover ratio is in times. It can be in periods, days, months, like holding periods are there, or in proportionate terms. 2:1 current ratio. Some ratios are in this proportionate form. So ratios can be expressed in different forms. There is standard for most of ratios, so you will be knowing by each ratio in what term it is to be presented. Ratios may be classified as balance sheet ratios. The ratio which can be purely computed from balance sheet without looking at P&L is balance sheet ratio. income statement ratio purely from P&L account without looking at balance sheet, and mixed ratio, one figure taken from P&L, one figure taken from balance sheet, then becomes the ratio. It is a mixed ratio. Balance sheet ratio like current ratio, current asset, current liability, both taken from balance sheet. Income statement ratio like GP ratio, GP taken from P&L, sale taken from P&L. Mixed ratio, ROI, return comes from P&L and investment comes from balance sheet, so it is a mixed ratio. This is a classification we use at smaller classes. Categories in our ratio analysis. These are categories that we'll be doing today in detail. Long-term solvency, liquidity, turnover, profitability, and investor ratios. There are the 5 categories to be done in detail. First category, long-term solvency ratios. They are also known as capital structure ratios, leverage ratios, many other names are there. Now, terms that we use here, you should be clear about the differences in those terms. Equity share capital is purely capital without any profits and losses. Reserves are not included. When I include equity share capital plus reserves, reserves always net of negative reserves, net of the P&L debit or any losses which are there. Equity share capital plus reserves make equity shareholder funds. Then shareholder funds, net worth, owner funds, they are exactly one and same. What are they exactly? Equity shareholder funds plus preference share capital. In some Ind AS, preference share capital has been talked about like a debt. But for analyst point of view in ratio analysis, he considered them as owners. So all the owners are included there. Net worth, owner funds, shareholder funds, or even the word equity includes reserves and preference capital. What is capital employed or long-term funds employed? That is important. What is this? This is net worth plus long-term debt. Long-term debt of all kinds, debenture holders, bank loan, whatever. The long-term part is in non-current debt, I can say. Whatever part of the debt did not fall into current liabilities, that will come here. So, net worth plus long-term debt will make long-term funds employed or capital employed. This is a capital structure of the company basically. So, this is the terms which we will be using in this category of ratios. Now, 2 categories we are going to study in long-term solvency ratios. Some ratios will analyze safety of principal and some will analyze safety of recurring returns, which are called coverage ratios. Reaching all these categories, now concentrate on their formulas, their meanings, their interpretations. At some places the standards are also there, the you can say rule of the thumb, but not in most of the cases, and can be regulatory defined by some bank or an institution for a particular purpose. I cannot refer to those legal things. I have been saying repeatedly, my law is also not very great. So there may be some requirements under SEBI, FEMA, I am not much aware of, but still it can be institution to institution or for specific purpose. Here we are studying in general. Now, A category, first ratio is debt equity ratio and its variants. What I will say, standard formula that I like to use first of all is long-term debt divide by net worth, standard formula. But there are authors who are using variants. What are variants? long term debt divided by capital employed, total debt divided by capital employed by current liabilities, which effectively becomes the total of liability side basically. Even current liabilities included in the older formats. There are many more variants. No, it is total debt divided by net worth and many more. Now obviously when you are comparing two different balance sheets, you should be taking same formula and then make the analysis. What is the interpretation you are going to get from here? You are trying to get a ratio of funds of the owners and funds of the outsiders. You are making a comparison between the same. Long term debt is outsiders. Shareholder funds, net worth is owners of the company. You are getting a ratio of this. If this ratio is huge, if this ratio is big, means huge leverage for the company. You must understand a concept. Leverage is a double-edged weapon. If everything is good, leverage is very good. If something is bad, leverage is very bad. Higher the leverage, higher is the problem. Take the example of today. In COVID, when businesses are not working under the lockdown, they are not earning anything. If it is high ratio, means huge debt as compared to the net worth, it's a problem. It is simple concept. Let me share. If return rate of entity is higher than interest rate, leverage is good. High debt is good. If interest rate exceeded return rate of entity, leverage is bad. And we should admit, as of today in lockdown, the return is almost zero. Whatever is interest rate is going to be paid out of pockets. That will create problems for the business. So leverage is bad in these days. In good days, you are paying limited, let's say even 18% interest to the bank, and you are earning at 30%. So all money you are earning on that, 12% extra for equity shareholders. That is something positive effect of the leverage. So debt equity ratio is important to analyze this, that what you are going to get, how much leverage you are having in the entity. Next, capital gearing ratio. It is similar to debt equity ratio, but sometimes confused a little bit. Try to understand. What was debt equity ratio? Debt equity ratio was long term debt divided by shareholder funds. Capital gearing ratio long term debt plus preference share capital divide by equity shareholder funds. Here ownership concept is not there. Fixed commitment and variable commitment concept is there. Funds with fixed commitment divide by funds with variable commitment. Now, if you had treated preference share capital like loans, then this is just like debt equity ratio there. So, this is more relevant from functional point of view. The leverage is really told by this capital gearing ratio, less by the debt equity ratio. Fixed assets ratio. It's a very easy formula. Fixed assets divide by capital employed into 100. I'll give you this, you don't need to note even. I'll give you with all written there, whatever I'm writing. So it is fixed assets divided by capital employed. It tells me out of capital employed, what percentage is fixed assets? Balance is working capital. Be very sure if it is written fixed asset turnover ratio, it is something else. Fixed asset turnover ratio is something else. Fixed asset ratio is this. So it tells me proportion of fixed asset in the capital employed. If it is 60%, 40% is working capital. This is fixed asset ratio. Proprietary ratio is very interesting. But it is again differently defined by different people. This is proprietors funds divide by total assets into 100. It is telling me how much of the total assets are being financed out of owners funds. Proprietor fund, owner funds, the net worth, they are same. In total asset, be very sure we are not including fictitious asset. What percentage of total asset is from owner funds? Balance is out of what? Debt funds. Balance is out of the loan funds. It is just explaining you the financing of your fixed assets. Obviously, it does not matter. Proprietor comes and says this much is mine, I will take. Debt holder says no, it is not going to happen. It's just a ratio which is telling the proprietor's stake into the total assets. Now comes coverage ratio, safety of recurring returns. What is the recurring return for the long term debenture holder or lender? This is interest. EBIT divide by annual interest. It is in times. Higher it is, better is coverage from lender point of view. Lower it is, you are feeling unsafe as a lender, that whether they will be able to meet my interest obligations in next years or not. If EBIT declines, what will happen? So this is a ratio which is talking of coverage from that angle. Similarly, preference dividend ratio. Profit after tax divide by annual preference dividend shows coverage for preference shareholders. Higher ratio shows higher safety for preference shareholders. Very simple ratios. Next one, debt service coverage ratio. It is looking at two commitments towards lenders. One commitment is annual interest. Another commitment is repayment of principal part of their loan in next year. Now these are two things which are to be serviced out of cash profits being earned by entity. The formula is little bigger, but it is a logical formula. So formula there, profit after tax plus interest plus depreciation and amortization, non-cash items, whole divide by, this is cash profits before interest, whole divide by annual interest plus principal of loan payable in next year. Principal of loan which is repayable in next year. So it is going to show the coverage of interest and principal installments, principal part of the installment. Higher it is, better is the coverage. Shows coverage of interest and principal repayments. Higher the ratio, better is the coverage in the minds of lenders. If it is lower, you may not be able to get fresh loans or fresh debentures, you may not be able to issue to the debenture holders. This is the first category, long-term solvency ratios. So the next category is short-term solvency ratios, also called liquidity ratios. These ratios are very common. We use it day in and day out. Current ratio is what? It is current assets divided by current liabilities. Definitions of these we have already talked in the asset categorization. Now, there was one Tandon and Chore committee report. It said minimum it should be 1.33. Rule of thumb, some people say it should be 1.5. Earlier they used to say 2 times. So that is not exactly defined, but minimum was defined by this committee 1.33 times. Then comes liquid ratio, which has many other names, quick ratio or acid test ratio. So liquid ratio is also called quick ratio or acid test ratio. This is quick assets divided by quick liabilities. Some authors divide by current liabilities. They may be right in some situations, but standard formula is this. Now, what is quick assets? quick assets is equal to current assets minus stock, primarily stock, minus prepaid expenses if any. And quick liabilities is equal to current liabilities minus bank OD and cash credit. So if there is no bank OD or cash credit, then quick liabilities and current liabilities are equal. You can use interchangeably then. But technically, if there is bank overdraft, it is to be deducted for getting the quick ratio. Defensive interval Meyer is a very interesting ratio. It is simply saying with the available cash, how many days can you run the business? That is defensive interval Meyer. This is equal to cash and near cash assets like bank or whatever marketable securities you are having, which you can easily sell to get cash. Cash and near cash assets divide by average daily cash expenses. If I am having 1 lakh in cash and my daily kharcha is 10,000, I am having cash to run my business for 10 days if there is no more inflow. This is defensive interval Meyer. This is very useful in recession period. In period like this lockdown, it's a very, very important ratio to compute. Those who are having high defensive interval Meyer, they are able to retain their staff, they are able to pay their normal expenses in cash. But those who are having 3 days, 4 days, they are certainly going to have big problems in their business till the time the lockdown is over. Because there is no inflow. How to do their regular spendings is a question mark. So this is defensive interval Meyer, part of the short-term solvency ratios. Next category, activity ratios or turnover ratios. Now in this, there are two ratios clubbed together. One is for turnover, another is related holding period. They are all interrelated. Let me tell you, the turnover ratio will be sale type item in the numerator divide by item for which turnover is computed. I'll reach specific turnover ratio, they will get more. Holding period is nothing. 365 divided by turnover ratio. If you are computing in days, 12 divided by turnover ratio. If you are computing in months, and so on. The general formula you can remember. The turnover ratio numerator is some activity level, sale, cost of goods sold, purchase, something like that. And denominator is the average of the item for which you are computing turnover. Let's go specific. Debtors turnover ratio. DTR, credit sales divide by average debtors. This is what you will get in times. Debt collection period 365 by DTR, 12 divided by DTR, 52 divided by DTR if you are computing in weeks. Now, what is the relevance of all this? The period tells me in how many days my credit sales are getting converted into cash. You can check your debtor collection period and compare with your credit policy. If credit policy is 30 days and your debt collection period is 90 days, your debtor collection is not good at all. Your people are bad at collections. So you can get implications from there. Stock turnover ratio, STR, or inventory turnover ratio, you can call it ITR. Cost of goods sold divided by average stock. This is in times. How many times the stock gets converted into sales? This is told by this STR. Inventory holding period, 365 divided by STR. In months, 12 divided by STR. In weeks, 52 divided by STR. You should have high STR. Implies efficiency in converting stock into sales. When there is some non-moving stock, it will create problems in stock turnover ratio. You can start getting indications of the bad stock if you are having low stock turnover ratio or high stock holding period. Creditors turnover ratio. Credit purchases divide by average payables. Now remember, in debtor turnover ratio, the denominator debtors included BR, bills receivable. BR is nothing, the people who have given you in writing, those debtors who have given you in writing. Here payables include creditors and bills payable. Name of creditors, accounts payable, and BP, bills payable. Both are included in the denominator of this ratio. Creditors plus BP is payables. Now creditors holding period, 365 divided by creditors turnover ratio, or 12 divided by creditors turnover ratio, or 52 divided by creditors turnover ratio. Working capital turnover ratio. Now these are some overall activity ratios. Sales divided by average working capital. Let me tell you, all turnover ratios, higher they are, better it is. Exception, creditor turnover ratio. Lower creditor turnover ratio is good. If you are paying slowly, will be good, but should be as per your negotiated terms. Average payment period, higher it is, good it is. All other ratios, turnover ratios, higher they are, better it is. Other holding periods, lower they are, better it is. Similarly, fixed asset turnover ratio, sales divided by average fixed assets. It is showing efficiency of utilizing fixed asset for generating sales. So higher it is, better it is. For 1 rupee of fixed asset, how many rupees sale you are able to generate? Last year I was generating 10 rupees, now I am generating 20 rupees. So I am generating much more sale from same fixed assets, or relatively from same fixed asset I am generating more and more sale. That will be good. Similarly, capital turnover ratio. Sales divided by average capital employed. The interpretation of last three ratio is same. Fixed asset, working capital and capital employed. We are having same interpretation. Sale generated per rupee of working capital, per rupee of fixed asset, per rupee of capital employed. That is being told here. So efficiency will be analyzed in these terms. Next category, profitability ratios. GP ratio, GP divided by sales into 100. Most of these starting profitability ratios, they are divided by sale into 100. Name divided by sale into 100. What is GP? Sale minus cost of goods sold. Now, what is cost of goods sold? Cost of goods sold is, for a manufacturing company, material consumed, direct labor, direct expenses, factory overheads, plus opening stock, WIP and finished goods, minus closing stock, WIP and finished goods. This is for manufacturing company. For our purpose, trading firm, opening stock plus purchases minus closing stock. This is purchases net of returns. So this is cost of goods sold. Divide by, sales minus cost of goods sold is gross profit. Cost of goods sold came earlier also in stock turnover ratio. There also you can use. Then net profit ratio. Net profit divided by sales into 100. I told already, net profit can have many meanings. It can be profit before tax, EBIT, profit after tax, but this is the default meaning always. Default meaning is profit after tax. The interpreter may change the meaning accordingly, you can also change, but default meaning is profit after tax. Operating profit ratio. This is interesting. This is one question which I always get wrongly answered by the students. Meaning of operating expense. My question always is manufacturing overhead an operating expense? Under this definition that I am going to use, answer is big no. Definition of this I am writing here, which will help clarify the things. Expense other than COGS, which is for operations of business. Once it is other than COGS, means manufacturing overhead is not operating expense, because it is manufacturing overhead included in COGS. So small technicality which you should know. So what are operating expenses? Operating expense equal administration overhead plus selling overhead. Now operating cost, the terms are important. Equals COGS plus operating expense. Is manufacturing overhead part of operating cost? Yes. Is manufacturing overhead part of operating expense? No. It is cost, not expense. So small technicality that you can remember. What is operating profit? Due to that I am telling you this. Operating profit equals GP minus operating expense or sales minus operating cost. That is very simple to remember. If you start from net profit, NP, add back non-operating expense minus non-operating revenues. That is also correct way of computing operating profit. The formula is simple. Operating profit divided by sales into 100. This is the ratio. So terms are more important than anything else. The formulas are quite simple. Formulas can be remembered. Expense ratio, they name an expense and call for its ratio. It is specific expense divided by sales into 100. Specific expense divided by sales into 100. Now comes some bigger ratios, more important relevant ratios. ROI, EBIT divided by capital employed into 100. This is standard formula. After tax, you can get EBIT 1 minus tax divided by capital employed into 100. That is return on investment. Return on equity, profit after tax divided by average net worth into 100. Net worth is shareholder funds, proprietor funds, owner funds, so many names we have talked earlier. Last category of ratios, investor ratios. Earning per share is very, very interesting. If you look at accounting standard, lots of things told there. You are told basic earnings per share, diluted EPS. We are not going to talk all of these things. They are accounting issues basically. We are analyst. It is earnings available for equity shareholders divided by number of equity shares. In standard, we use weighted average number of equity shares. We are not talking that much detail here, but that is not relevant. At your level, this formula is sufficient. Earnings available for equity shareholders means profit after tax and after preference dividend and CDT thereon. Divided by number of equity shares. That will give me EPS. Now, DPS you can easily compute. Dividend per share. Total equity dividend divided by number of equity shares. Total equity dividend divided by number of equity shares. Earnings yield ratio. EPS divided by MPS into 100. The relevance of this I will explain along with the next ratio. Dividend yield ratio. DPS divided by MPS into 100. Now try to understand. A company is there. They issued rupees 100 shares at par. Next year, they give dividend of 30 per share. Now, if I am investor who bought in public issue, for me return on my investment is 30%. Very simple. But somebody who bought it from market, let us say market price per share is rupees 300. He bought it at this rate. This investor gets ROI 30 on 300 rupees invested, 10% only. This is called yield for that investor. Dividend yield when you are taking dividend. If you are using earning, it is earnings yield. If you are using dividend, it is dividend yield. Cash part, dividend yield. Accrual part, earnings yield. Simple. But it is based on market price. If I went to market today and bought the shares today at today's market price, what is my yield? What is my earning on that particular category? That is told by earnings yield and dividend yield. Dividend payout, another interesting ratio. DPS divided by EPS into 100. Reverse of retention ratio. Out of earnings, what percentage has been paid as dividend? If EPS 30 per share, DPS 15 per share, then dividend payout 50%, retention 50%. If on EPS 30, DPS is 20, dividend payout 66, 2 by 3%, retention 33, 1 by 3%. So they are both interrelated ratios. Remember, in language, in some mod exam, I got a question. The company declares a dividend of 30%. Now this 30% is not a dividend payout ratio. This is 30% on capital, on face value. Then it said compute dividend payout ratio. So I compute, let's say 100 per share is face value, 30% dividend declared, 30 rupees per share is dividend. Now look at earning per share. If it is 50, 60% is dividend payout ratio. So try to get language correctly. Is it dividend percentage or dividend payout percentage? Makes a difference. Price earnings ratio, one of the most important ratios which is given in your Economic Times and all business newspapers. MPS divided by EPS. Question arises, this is in Times. Would you like this ratio to be high or low? That is a big question mark. There are many people who are big analysts. I'll not be able to match anybody of them. But should it be high or low? There is no clear answer. If I am existing shareholder, if I am management, I would love it to be high. My company earns 10 rupees per share and my price earning ratio is 40 times, my MPS becomes 400. MPS going high. I can sell my share, earn more. Existing shareholder. Management will like it to happen to show that big capitalization is there. Now it should be low for prospective shareholders, investors, buyers. Those who are thinking to planning to buy in that company. They like market price to be low. Present PE ratio is low and future I am expecting it to be high. Then I will buy that share. So that is the interpretation of price earnings ratio that you are having in your Financial Times and all business newspapers. Now there is an interesting DuPont analysis for you, very important for ROE. I am giving it for ROI also, which is there in the books. DuPont company is a US company who analyzed on relevance of ratios. It found that ROI or ROE, they are the prime ratios. It further made their analysis. What was ROI? ROI, I said EBIT, average capital employed. No, they said let it be EBIT by total assets. They said it can be further written as EBIT divided by sales multiplied by sales divided by total assets. This is what that company said. So this is EBIT ratio, which is a profit ratio, multiplied by asset turnover ratio. They have done so much of further analysis which we are not into. ROE more important for you. This is important analysis for your understanding. DuPont chart analysis for return on equity. Now what is return on equity? PAT divided by net worth. They said we can write it like PAT divided by sales into sales divided by net worth. We can write it like this. Further, we can write it as PAT divided by sales, sales divided by assets multiplied by assets divided by net worth. They called this ratio financial leverage ratio. That is their definition. So this is important equation they have given. They have scattered the ROE as net profit ratio, asset turnover ratio and financial leverage ratio. This is DuPont analysis for breaking up return on equity into three components. One component is profitability ratio, another is a turnover ratio, activity ratio, and third one is the financial leverage ratio defined by them. This is very important to remember. I have seen questions on this for sure in the classes and all. Next, miscellaneous analysis. This is all what is written in your syllabus. That's why I have done 2-3 lines for each of these categories. Performance analysis. Continuous process of identifying, measuring, developing performance in organization by linking individual performance to organization goals. So general management concept. You're doing performance analysis of each and every activity relating it to organization goal. Financial performance analysis is process of identifying financial strengths, weaknesses by establishing relation between items of balance sheet and income statement. Means you are doing ratio analysis basically. By doing that analysis, you are finding your entity's performance. That is performance analysis given there little bit. Capital structure analysis. Capital structure analysis is periodical evaluation of all components of debt and equity of business. The objective is to analyze optimal debt equity mix. Now in ratios, what ratios are important? Capital structure ratios. That is the first category, solvency ratios. You are trying to judge how my WACC can be lowest. Tomorrow's class will include cost of capital. How the weighted average cost of capital can be lowest, which will increase the value of my firm. You keep on monitoring that. That is called capital structure analysis. Credit analysis. You're getting your credit rating done basically in this. Credit analysis helps in analyzing credit worthiness of the entity. You're trying to establish credit worthiness. Good credit worthiness, good credit rating. People will be ready to give you loans easily. So doing that credit analysis. In other words, it is evaluation of ability of company to honor its financial obligations. Will you honor your obligations or not is analyzed in credit analysis. Audited financial statement, large company might be analyzed when it issues or has issued bonds. Or banks may analyze the financial statements of small business before making or renewing a commercial loan. This term refers to either case whether business is large or small. So, you're getting your credit analysis done before you get into the loan making. Before you take the loan, you are into the credit analysis, getting it done. Cash flow analysis, further, they are talking of some ratios related to cash flow. Cash flow per share, they say operating cash inflows minus preference dividend divided by number of equity shares. In all the three, operating cash flow divided by sale or equity or assets. You can find these ratios and keep comparing with previous years or with other entities, and you can get some cash flow performance of your own entity. Or with budget, you can compare the actuals and you can get the cash flow performance ratios. I've taken quite a time in this. I hope it will be useful for you. I'll carry on with the second and third segment in this. In this second segment, I'll recommend you some reference material for the day. These ones are quite good. You may not be knowing them. They're related to a paper of CS Final. One of their paper, it corresponds to our valuation. It's a very good study material available on their website. How you can reach it? Go on to www.icsi.edu. You'll get their home page. On the home page, look out for academic portal. Once you reach there, look at icon new syllabus. On that icon, you will find one box where it is written more info. Click that. Look at study material. Under more info, you go to study material. Under that, professional program. And under that, you are looking at paper 9.7, which is named as valuation and business modeling. Once you download it, it is around 500 pages module. All concepts related to your valuation part, 35 marks or 40 marks, I'll say, they're all included there. I don't say I've gone through all the parts of this, but some parts I've gone through are simply great. There's nothing like objective type questions, but concepts can be taken from there. If you want to do some practical questions on this, it's not objective type, it's solving questions for the sake of your concept clarity. On same website, under new syllabus, look at practice questions. Again, professional program, same paper, valuation and business modeling. It is around 100 pages. There it is like 500 pages. I'll simply say they can serve as a reference material for your understanding of concepts in valuation. I hope that you like them. Here we reach the third segment of the day, strategic tip of the day. Now this tip relates to time management during the exam. Now what we are having exact 120 minutes for 90 to 92 questions. Let me tell you, it is more than sufficient time to complete the exam. If I can rightly recall, I completed it in 90 to 95 minutes. I was not great in doing many things. I left a few things, as I talked yesterday also. You can leave some of things, but you'll have to read before you leave. Now, while you are doing the exam, there is an option. You can click a button that I want to recheck this question in the end. Even if you don't click it, you can recheck the question that you have attempted for sure. But what I suggest, the question which you are doing surely correctly, you don't want to read again. You don't have to recheck it. The question you are not very sure about, or the calculation question, you must revise your calculations in the end, so that due to small things you don't get that negative 1.25 marks or 2.5 marks. There will be 10, maybe 15 questions which are little long or which require calculations. These must be revised. The little long questions, if you are sure about answer, don't need to revise. Otherwise, within 30 seconds, a question can be attempted if you know the answer. So going by that, I think 90 minutes will be sufficient. Not every question will be able to do in 30 seconds. So these 10-15 long questions, you may have to apply little more time. But again, you can apply a rule out approach. While reading a question, A option is incorrect, B is incorrect, C is incorrect, then surely D is the answer. You can easily opt for that. Make sure the calculation question, you must revise your calculation in the end. Whatever time is available, utilize it. I have not seen anybody saying that the time was insufficient for doing the exam. If you know it, time is sufficient. If you don't know it, time is sufficient. If you are adequately confused, then time is insufficient. So don't get confused. Be sure to be on one side and time management will be automatically done. That is a tip I could give today. So the last segment, objective type question for the day. I hope the time will not permit me to do it here. But again, there are around 47 questions that I'll be posting you. And believe me, they are not as simple as yesterday's questions. They will have something to worry about, some things to calculate, and surely there can be multiple opinions. I'll take problems offline again and you'll get some better questions in this. So we'll continue with more tomorrow.